That's 1/10 of the mix. That one sour grape, that one very acidic grape, is going to throw off the whole thing because there's only 10 grapes to begin with. If there's one little sour grape and there's 100 grapes, do you see it's going to have less effect on that? People and subjects, according to science, are the same thing. If we're doing an experiment in here and Jerry has incredible math skills, but no one else does, in a class of 40 people, and 40 is the magic number for an experiment, you have to have at least 40 people in a group. Jerry's math genius is going to get kind of watered down by the other 39 people. But if Jerry's a math genius and we only have 5 people in that study, holy cow, she's going to completely skew the data. Does that make sense to everyone? I mean, it's really fascinating. I'm not a fan of statistics and applying statistics to human beings. I'm not even a fan of experimentation to human beings. But it is neat to see how it works. I'm fascinated by how this whole thing, the ideology behind it is interesting. It's fascinating. But check this out. Here's a real life example. Did I tell you guys about George W. Bush's statement back in, must have been around 2004? He was president, and all kind of media went crazy on this one, and maybe you'll remember it after I say it, because I talk about this a lot. George W. Bush, the second Bush, he was president, and he made a statement, I think it was in New Yorker magazine, that the average income of Americans was, anyone remember this? $86,000 a year. $86,000, yeah, I think it's funny too. $86,000 a year is the average American income in 2004. There's this big article, he made the statement, and everybody went off it. Is this guy that out of touch? I mean, this is nuts. Well, guess what? He was right. The mean average income of Americans at this time is $86,000 a year. In other words, if you take all the people in the country and add up their income and divide it by the number of people there, it turns out to be $86,000 at that time.
That is one individual or?
Per individual. Income. You see the problem with averages? It's a problem with statistics. It's a problem with if I give you a class average. Well, what happened here? How could this be the case? Well,
did he do a certain group?
Everybody.
Everybody?
That means it's more rich people.
The problem is this.
That 2% rich people.
This doesn't talk about what the majority of people's income is per year. That's called the mode. So you have the mean, but you also have the mode. The mean is the average. Take the total amount divided by the amount of people who have it, and you have the average. The mode would be, what do most people in the population have as their income, right? Now, you understand the mode and the mean, and there's another one called the median, which is when you have 100 people, what do the people right in the center have? You line up from least income to most income, and you get here right in the middle, like number 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. What do they make? That's the median. The mode is what do most people make, and the average is take everybody together, add it up, divide it by the number of people there are. Now here's the thing, the three numbers are completely different. The average income was $86,000 simply because there were the top 10%, it was actually 8% of the population controls 90% of the money. So when you had people added in there like Bill Gates, Donald Trump, all these big multi-billionaires, when you added them into the equation, you were getting an average that was skewing. It wouldn't be unlike Jerry having mad math techniques in 5 people, right? That's how strong that one little group of people are that have so much money. It skews the whole thing. So if you would actually look at the mean, the mean might be, if this is 100,000 a year, and this is 0, 86 would be around here. So the mean might be like this. If we looked at the mode, what most people make, and I'm going to make a rough judgment that it's somewhere, and I don't know this, so please don't quote me on this, but just from my knowledge of reading, census crap and that, I'm going to guess that it's somewhere around 20 to 24,000 here. It's somewhere around there. If do you see the big difference between what an average is and what the mode is? They're two different things. That's something to keep in mind. Averages can be very misleading. However, when the more people we have in a group, the more average is going to be watered down, and One last example might be if you have a test and there's 10 people in the, oh, let me put it this way. If you have 2 people in a classroom and they take the test, one person gets a 0 and the other person gets 100, what's the average of the class? 50. Is that representative of either of those people? No, it's misleading. It's like this quote I love, the average human being has 1 breast and 1 testicle. Right? Have you ever met this person? The average human being, you take a man and a woman, you average them out, there's 1 breast and 1 testicle. So in other words, statistics, we have to be careful with what these represent and what we infer them to even mean. Right? Jerry, you look, either you're concentrating or you're sad. I don't know which it is. Bored. So I'm trying here in this now to go a little more in depth than we went in intro class. I'm showing you it's a little, I gave you an intro class, those of you who have me, I gave you the basics, the gist, and now we're getting down into real nuts and bolts of this statistical stuff. Right? And if you want to be a psychologist, remember this, you are going to suffer through at least probably 4 semesters of statistics. Right? At least that was my experience. I had a year of statistics in undergrad and a year of statistics in graduate school.
Now, you know what it was? You know what it was? So my sociology class was last night.
Oh.
And I mean the same exact thing. And your interpretation of it. So I'm sitting here like,
Oh, is it different?
wow.
So
It's like, because with her, I was like, With you, I'm like, yeah. Okay, now that makes sense.
Oh,
Like
okay,
that
good.
just, it clicked.
All
So
right.
I'm sitting here like, wow, yeah. So you read that.
Oh, yeah, because I was
Yeah,
wondering, it looked like
Because
I
I'm
either you were,
serious.
I
It
didn't
was-
know if you were disturbed by this or
I know,
bored.
'cause I'm like, wow.
Wow.
It was,
Cool.
it was just like, whoa. Yeah, the same exact words.
Can I share, I want to share something with you. Do you know, I hear what you're saying. Do you know what I did before I became a teacher? I tutored psychology students. I was in undergrad and I had to make some money. And so I got paid like $11 an hour to tutor any class that I had an A in at the college I went to. So I had A's in all my psych classes and not on my other classes, but psych classes just, I got an A in them. And so these students would come, introduction to psychology students, right? And they'd be so confused because whatever, the professor made it more complicated than it was. So for about a year, I sat down maybe sometimes 14, 15 times a week trying to make it as simple as possible. And I think it was the best training I could have ever gotten, because then when I actually got in the classroom and I graduated a few years later, my master's degree, I started teaching, it sounds like, wow, I know how to make this simple. And I wonder sometimes, I think there's a couple things. People who make things complicated, either A, they don't quite understand it themselves, so it's complicated because they don't quite get it, or there's another downfall, and that is some people like to make things more complicated than they are to make themselves look smarter. You get what I mean? And those are two motivations that can go wrong. But I'm all about, I'm like Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the sign of a true spirit is one who can take the most difficult concepts and make them simple. You know, so I like to, sometimes I might make them too simple. That might be a fault.
Never.
Because inevitably, when you make things too simple, you leave stuff out that's necessarily important. But I think this is good enough for experimentation. Any questions or thoughts about experimental method and statistics? Okay. Let's see. How about the next method of research that social psychologists typically use? It's correlational studies. I guess the most important thing to remember about correlation is that it's based on not cause and effect, but on relationships. The word's right in there, so you don't even have to memorize it. Correlation is about relationships. And in correlation, we're never looking at what does A cause B. That's experimental research. In correlation, we're just saying, how do two things occur together? You know, there's a correlation between people wearing coats and hats and the temperature outside. Now, we can also say that the cold weather has caused people to wear coats and hats. Okay, but when we do a correlational study, we're not making any causal claims. We're just saying what two things seem to occur together or not occur together. So in correlation, We're looking at relationships.